Yes, we have our auditor here. She's gonna kind of answer you guys' questions. I sent the audit a couple of days ago for you guys to review and come up with some questions for. Keep in mind that a lot of the feedback she gave us last year for the 22 audit obviously won't be in this audit because this is for 2023. We didn't get that feedback until the end of 2024. But we are able to address that at the end of the meeting because that was one of the requests at our last finance committee meeting. But other than that, Stephanie, take it away.
Just kind of like last year, I'm not going to kind of go through the entire audit report. Everything came back clean. I gave y'all a clean audit opinion. Attached to it is probably y'all's biggest, not issues, but just the communications management on things that y'all can do a little bit better, about proper documentation, recording the stuff. It took me a little bit longer to do the audit because I had to reclassify and code several items to try to get them to proper accounts, like revenues, expenses, and stuff like that for recording purposes, which was evidenced by the amount of bookkeeping that normally an auditor is not supposed to do extra bookkeeping. So that's why a couple of y'all saw some journal entries and had to sign off on those. Just so I could say, yes, I did get all of this approved, y'all, because an audit means that I should make management decisions, and those are considered management decisions. So, but just basically, the management letter it's a lot of what we discussed last year, if y'all remember, about just getting the QuickBooks reconciled properly, coding things to the right account, making sure we have proper documentation and support for things. There were a few little nitpicky things where, like the reimbursements didn't match automatically, but there was nothing significant. As long as everything reimbursement-wise, I think credit cards are a big thing. Making sure that we have access to credit cards, that those are getting reviewed by board members, since there's only 2 employees at the land bank, and making sure all of those are just reviewed and proper documentation is there as well. Y'all had a big, I guess the biggest change in going from 22 to 23 is on both the 22 and the 23, y'all have a receivable for $500,000. That is the ARP funds from the city. So y'all were actually awarded it in 22, but it came in 23. The same with 23 came in 24, but it is for the 22-23 year, hence why there's a receivable. This year, I did have to record the note payable to capitalize. I know that's kind of washed. I believe I got some clarification on that partnership, but I know that all that was eventually returned, but for reporting purposes, it had to be reported as it was owed as of December 31st, 2023. I'm trying to think what else. I think y'all's Duke City was up from the prior year because that there was a couple of properties for the city that had closed, but they haven't been reimbursed this month yet. So that's why that is up. If y'all look back at 2022 versus 23, y'all see that's a little bit higher this year. But other than that, things were pretty similar to the prior year. Y'all had a little bit more activity with acquisitions, rehabilitation, property management, all coming from those funds. So we've seen those funds come in and right back out. Does anybody have any specific questions that y'all would like answered? Because I did bring my files just in case if I had to go back and look at 22 versus the 23. And so does anybody have any specific questions? But that's just the highlights of the report.
Just for the board, because I know in the email correspondence from y'all to us as staff, there was also a question of whether or not we have even doing resolutions or things that were noted in the management letter. And the only one that I noted that we need to work to rectify in the future is the concentrations when it comes to our risk and maintaining balances above the $250,000 FDIC limit in accounts. There are times where we have excess funding above those limit amounts when transactions come in that will either be given to the city, most likely HCB for their stuff, or in the event when we receive special funding like Rescue Plan Act, we can open up what I'm calling loosely an overflow account. if the finance committee and full board would like to see that we maintain no more than 250 in any account, and we can do that at any of the banks that we operate with at this time, it would be a lot of fluctuation or movement of funding in those excess accounts, because once John closes the property to the land bank for HCD, we're pretty much getting ready to cut a check back. But it was noted in the audit, just something to be aware of at one point in time, us having more than $125,000 sitting there. If the committee would like to see that at all times, we're maintaining an FDIC limit above or below that 250, we can open up an additional account with y'all.
Just keep in mind that the FDIC limit applies to a specific bank, not specific accounts rather. So it's the money management of funds through separate banks, because you're insured through each bank for 200 million. So if you did have something even spread out over 3 accounts, if it's all concentrated in one bank, all 3 accounts are covered up under the 1,250,000. So just kind of keep that in mind if you do want to spread your funds. And the audit report just notes it what's at year end. So that could have changed 2 days after the audit report was produced, and you could have been fine.
What would be our liability, John, if for some reason something occurred and we're holding these monies for HCD? Because 9 times out of 10, that's what the situation is. Something were to happen and this $125,000, there is no coverage for it and they can't recover. What would be our
above and beyond the 250? Technically, we'd be on the hook for that $125,000 to whoever that money is owed to. The likelihood of that happening pretty low. But technically, yeah, we were out because we're aware that we're only insured to 250. So technically, yeah, we'd be liable to them, and we could turn around and sue the bank that collapsed or whatever. But technically, we'd be liable to them.
For transactions like where we're receiving payment for property and immediately passing it, we have an account that's just set up for that kind of escrow pass-through, or is it a single account for that?
Yeah, our operating account receives mostly proceeds, reserve account mostly holds city funding. There's not an account that's designated as the specific pass-through only for transaction sales, because those funds do come in as payable and then go right out. But we could, again, we could establish something of that nature. Most often, we know exactly what the documents are. So John sends documentation over, it's always the approved transaction minus our $500 fee. We make the deposit, and we're ready for that check to go right back out to them. But we don't have an account that only handles HCD.
We've been fortunate that they don't usually, probably the likelihood, especially in this environment right now, is not really great. They're going to sell more than one house at a time, but they could. And just about all of them would be more than $150,000.
And to the chairman, well, not chairman of the committee, but to that point, with the current inventory requests made by the commission, it may be something for the finance committee to consider, because if the city, and by city I mean the city political leadership, starts to liquidate housing and community development properties, and if they choose to use the land bank to do so, then it will be a lot of stuff going out. There's no way for us to know what the position on that is. I will say for the committee that we did meet with the interim director, Mr. Charles Jackson, and all parts of his staff, redevelopment, affordable housing, and rehabilitation, to know what that inventory might begin to look like. But per your 23 audit, we hold somewhere in the neighborhood market value about $6 million of properties for them. If they use us to liquidate, we're going to need some checks and balances in place to ensure that we're tracking all of their funding. We just don't know yet.
I would think we need an agreement from the city. Because how many accounts? You sell 3 properties, and those properties run over that amount. You can't have so many overflow
Yeah, they have
accounts.
50 plus rental houses that would push us to.
Yeah, this is all on the premise that the banks can collapse, which there's a lot of checks and balances for that not to occur, but I guess it could. It has in the past, but nothing happened. But I see where you're going, but the likelihood of that ever
And it has been known.
yeah.
most of our companies, we've got an operating account and a reserve account. And then if the company's large enough, we do set up additional reserve accounts and do cash management between them. It does become a little bit of an administrative burden, so I think you gotta judge the risk factor versus how much time it takes from the staff. But I do think when it's not urgent, a goal could be set to set up one or two additional money market accounts at other banks. Then at least they're open and ready, and you kind of keep a small balance and then use your discretion on how much you need to do.
I'm just talking because I'm back on monopoly.
Okay. Do we need to discuss that further or make a motion there, or just no?
No, so we can investigate local banking options and bring them back to the finance committee to say, here's what is available. It's primarily between Cadence and Security Federal, I think, on everything, which includes the conference account. But we can look at our local options, bring those back and say, in the event that the finance committee would like for us to establish alternate accounts, then that way you can choose them.
Follow y'all's recommendation and desire, right? Just in the private world, we ask the banks what money market rates are you offering?
Yeah.
How high can you go, and then decide which banks can use based on that. If we're done with that, I do want to go back into this report a little bit. Let's see. I've got a few different things I want to ask about, and so I'll list a few of them and then come back. I think one, I'm just understanding what the current transition plan is, and we can come back to that. You know, a few of these items are things that were brought up on the 2022 report. So we talked at our February meeting about credit card statements, a plan for that, how travel reimbursements were getting handled, bookkeeping and reconciliations. Just maybe before we get specifically into that, just any updates from staff on what's been implemented this year.
Yes, so as far as reconciliations, we are on a current monthly basis. So typically, like today's the first, I will be doing them. I have done some so far, but I'll go back after the meeting and do the rest of them.
Okay.
But we are doing that on a monthly basis now. As far as like credit card transactions, even debit card transactions, any transaction that isn't made by check, I do get that reviewed by our board chair. So we have sign-offs and all of that. I forgot to bring the authorization form that we have, but I write, $14 on the clerk's authority subscription, and I get that signed off. Is that right there?
Okay.
I get that signed off every time we have a transaction that's not by check, because they obviously have to sign every check. I think there was another thing about mileage, which I think Director Edwards has to speak to. He's been working with HR at the city on that.
I was gonna say, that's the fringe benefits, y'all have to do something about that, because that's actually against IRS regulations.
And that's been regulated,
Yeah.
Not regulated, corrected.
Yeah, I know y'all said y'all were gonna try to correct that early this year.
Yeah, I think that our last, you correct me, the last mileage reimbursement or allowance reimbursement is going to be March or April.
I'd have to check,
Yeah.
but it's been a while.
Yeah, HR has since corrected that, they were able to put it in the salary and his tax.
And that came right after you did your report. That's what we're starting.
Yeah, I know we're kind of a year behind, so things that I recommended on this one too, of course, didn't take effect until 24, which hopefully your new auditor will be able to see all of that going forward.
So is the chairman signing off on both of your credit cards and expense reports, or does it go?
So I don't have a credit card,
Okay.
so I use the office's debit card,
Okay.
and so he signs off on those, and then Sean gives me his credit card purchases, and then when I pay the credit card bill, I attach those purchases to the authorization form and say I paid the bill of $50, and this is why it was $50, and it'll have his receipts on the back of it. So all of that is attached together. If that makes sense.
So what normally happens, Ryan, is when Sean and I, when Scott and I, Kamara gives us usually a weekly basis, sometimes a couple of weeks, a group of checks that need to be signed, and then she'll also have the credit card authorizations that I will sign. In fact, they're all in one folder
form, it does denote like, this was a debit transaction, it came out of the operating account. This was a credit transaction, this is the credit card bill, but I paid it out of the operating account, so on and so forth. So that's telling, we pay the credit card bill with the operating account.
I think
So
that sounds like a good system. I think my next question is that procedure typed down anywhere a document?
So I
If
am
the
working.
answer is no, that's okay. To me, this is the take-home part of the exam. And just what you do at our 2 o'clock meeting is really what you're here for, and the important part of everything that we do. And just if somebody comes back and says, "Oh my God, like this is concerning," and opens that up, we say, "Hey, this is what was in the report, and as of February 23rd, 2025, we established this policy and procedure, and there on out, it's crystal clear."
So to that point, I am working on like it's more like a comprehensive training manual,
Okay.
policy and procedure type thing, but it's a work in progress. So that is being worked on though. I am typing up in detail every process that we have.
I love that. I've learned a little bit from my wife, ChatGPT. I think if you just say exactly what this and say, put this into a 10-page document form, and date of 2025, that would be good to have it more.
But
Right.
I like that expression as part of the take home exam. I will use that.
Okay, and we have addressed otherwise the comments about the vehicle. We have addressed that earlier this year. Okay. How about, unless anybody else has anything else on this report, just anything on the transition plan, or where are we? And when is the 2024 report going to be ready? Who's going to be in on that?
Bayer will be in with y'all's report, according to the emails that I've received.
Okay.
The auditor's name, I don't know how to say her name.
I know the first name is Bakey.
Bakey?
Yeah, I can't remember the last name, but the first name is Bakey.
She has made contact with me,
Okay.
and I'm going to send her this afternoon. I wanted to wait until after this meeting to make sure there was no changes to anything before I send her everything. She's got a standard questionnaire for me, just auditor to auditor, and then she's gonna review my work papers, and anything that she needs from a prior year, I will make accessible to her. I'll probably have to get y'all to sign off on something that says that I'm allowed to share my work papers with her. And then, I guess they'll start on the audit. She's already requesting things, so, I'll send her what she needs. It'll probably be after about the 15th, because we have, individual tax deadlines coming up, so, but I'm gonna make available to whatever she needs and send it to her, and then I guess she'll be working directly with y'all on everything else.
Do we have a set cadence for when our finance committee meetings happen throughout the year?
They were supposed to be quarterly, but somehow we lost our way. I think it was with our meetings got off schedule, so the finance got off schedule, but originally we agreed on quarterly.
Okay.
So we could go back to that.
Okay, with whatever cadence, I think what I was gonna was just if we could get an update as to when the pass off happens, and then set a deadline for the 2024.
Well, the pass off is already gonna happen, since I'm done with the 23 audit.
Okay, you're ready.
Yeah, we're done, yeah, and so, essentially, since I'm done, they can go forward with any part of their audit, and whatever they need from me is just usually for analytical purposes, or record retention or something like that. It doesn't have a lot of bearing on their current procedures and what they do for the audit.
Okay.
So they should be able to start whenever they want, they'll be
Yes,
on their own deadline, and they'll just have to, but other than that, the only thing I have is just work papers. I won't do anything for
Okay.
the 23
So all that's gonna, I think,
Yeah, we
our
started.
experience with our
Yeah.
accountants is just, we set a deadline, usually 2 weeks before that, so I can start working on whatever it is. And so we should just set whatever that meeting's gonna be December, January, February, and let them know we'd like to have it ready for that.
So I think the new auditor sent me a list of things that she needs that I'm working through.
Okay.
I think it's gonna probably take me like maybe a month to get all of that to her, because it's a lot of just finding things. So we can follow up at the next month's meeting maybe, and kind of just get an update on where we're at. But at that point, everything should be just about turned into the new auditor. We've already started that process.
And I think if it's just a matter of providing us updates on what your progress is with providing information and their thought on, we got everything, it's going to be a month, 2 months
just said, and with the information that Kamara just provided, if we went back to that quarterly standard, we're starting in January, starting in the first one, be the beginning of the year, it'll take us the next 3 months. It gives them time to get everything on track. And like I said, unless it was something emergency where there was some vote needed.
I think January would be appropriate, keeping in mind that this January will also be, I guess, the end of our terms as the committee. So we might need to address that in December with the full board, whether we stay or we rotate out. January for the next discussion.
I'm going to ask the board to add me to the finance committee for whenever that next time, just so that, right now, it's 2 people. And that's tough, when you need to be off, and, we don't have a quorum. But I know Karen, but, just make sure you have enough people in the quorum. So rather than have the typical 3 that we've had, have 4. More than likely, one of the 3 of us, I mean, the 3 of us are usually at just about every meeting. So, but we can do that in December, since you have to address the terms anyway.
Makes sense.
What else was in here we want to chat about? So I guess there's a good section on control discrepancies. And we kind of addressed the credit card issues. But this, being in 23, I was signing checks with Chris in that time frame. And I was curious about the several transactions of travel reimbursements and other items. A check that were not approved by a board member. Look at control discrepancies. Addressing that first couple items.
And you're saying not approved?
Yeah, the first 2 were actually, when I pulled them, they were only approved by you. There was no second approval on them, whatever. And that could have been prior to the 22 report, and me, really kind of digging down on y'all's controls. I may be a little harder on y'all than maybe other auditors, because I know y'all are under so much scrutiny, and I'm just trying to think of in the best interest on that way. The land bank is, what can y'all truly be looking out for, so y'all don't get scrutinized and trying to under the bus. Is kind of what I did. And these are just everything, the control discrepancies are anything that if I reviewed it and they didn't go back to a policy that y'all said, hey, we're approving this and this, or this, whatever, or it was a discrepancy like in the chart or something. Like, I think there was 2 checks, reimbursement, and I think I have copies of everything that is here. I think I have copies of, but like on one thing, like Sean was in North Carolina on one day, but then on the same day he was supposedly in like Macon, Georgia or something like that, and the mileage for both was the same. So like that reimbursement request, to me, something is incorrect. I don't know what is incorrect about it, but it was obviously not correct. And they're very small amounts, so it doesn't amount to anything that would be considered. I chalk it up as trivial or human error, pretty much. But things like that gotta be careful of, because if there's something like a travel reimbursement, Sean, and it says date, 1/1, and he's supposed to be in North Carolina, but then it has room and board per diem, travel, and then he's got another travel reimbursement that has the same date, room and board, whatever. So what are we paying here? Are we paying duplicates? Was something incorrect? Was something correct? Or was just the date wrong? I mean, it could have been simple, like he was in North Carolina one day, spent the night, the next morning, then he had to be down at Macon for another day. I mean, it's very possible. Going to different meetings and conferences and stuff, it's very possible that, he could have had to be somewhere on Monday and then turn around by Tuesday afternoon and be somewhere else and have to get up very early. be more aware of these reimbursements and stuff, so that if y'all are under scrutiny, you got your ducks in a row.
I guess I was gonna say that, you know, if it's a matter of a reimbursement, are these true reimbursements, or are these checks being received prior to travel?
Typically, we don't do an advance, we'll do a settlement. And there's a form that we pull that we utilize in the city, so we use the exact same form. We'll know where we're going, any expenses that were paid in advance. If a check had to go for a hotel, for example, a debit card was used for that, because hotels don't take checks. But mileage and per diem will typically be done after. And then I'm signing those as the recipient, and there's a line for approval of them before a check is cut. So it will be travel and do it, and then we'll get reimbursed, and if it includes parking or anything that has a receipt, that'll be attached. So I'd have to go back and see what that was, what we were requesting a reimbursement from 23, that wasn't signed.
Mr. Chairman, I would take a look at two things. One, go back and take a look and see what those were.
Yeah.
Pull those, see what, all of these that are identified, and then make sure you get back to the committee on that. But also, take a look and see if these occurred prior to the controls. Take a look at what the control dates were. And I think these were after the control dates, but just verify the dates as well. And then get back to your committee, because I know anywhere in the world, you will remember what that is off the top of your head.
No.
I can tell you the first two are, the first one for 276 was October 15th to the 18th.
Yeah.
Was it 23?
I'm gonna make a motion similar to what Chairman Johnson just said. So, I think the auditor has done the auditor's job, which is to go through the books and raise some questions. And there's a list of 7 items that are right here. Let's just make this very process oriented. So you can just take these 7 items, respond to this committee with a letter that has an answer and the backup associated with each of those. At our next meeting, let's review that, ask any questions that we need to. And if the committee then approves those things, we'll submit them back to the auditor to put into her file and close it out as it's been responded. And we can continue that throughout until the committee's comfortable and need to address anything that wasn't approved.
And just make sure also, if you are doing a per diem, that's your meals expense.
Yes.
Make sure we're not reimbursing for meals as well. Because there was a couple, I think there's like 1 or maybe 2 of them, that said that you've got a per diem, but then you turn in a receipt for a meal. No matter how much that meal is, you've already got per diem. So if you want to get a direct reimbursement for meals, get that, or get per diem. But you can't get, it's kind of like the mileage, you can't get both.
Of course.
So, I would just pay attention to those kind of little things. Just know, really kind of, maybe the committee, the finance committee may need to, or just have Mr. Manton here, just kind of brush up on some IRS guidelines about, how, what's, it's either or kind of thing, like, mileage reimbursement, meals or per diem, stuff like that. And just kind of brush up on really what's acceptable, so that you're not doing both when it's either or kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Just a note, that was when you were included. That's when we were included.
Okay.
That was the last.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not incorrect, I'm just
No,
saying,
no,
based
no,
on
you just-
policy,
that's
just
just
get that
what-
approval.
As he's going back and take a look, see what's going on, he has a reference.
Chairman, I guess, or I can ask the auditor a question. So in some instances when we're at trainings, you may use a credit card to cover an expense for a guest at dinner. And so the receipt then will be, we may have posted a table. In that instance, how do I do that? Because I would have received a per diem for my meal, but then paying for someone else.
Yes, correct. And that is a perfect, as long as, it's been approved, and just say you go somewhere and you've got a per diem, for that day, so your breakfast, lunch, and dinner are essentially,
It's covered.
is covered. So, but you go out to dinner, and you take Joe out to dinner, and you're going to pay for his dinner. Joe's dinner would be reimbursed, but if your dinner and Joe's dinner are on the same receipt, only need to be reimbursed for Joe's Center.
Okay.
And I almost want to say, I'd have to check, I'm not 100% sure, but check into the tip guidelines as far as that reimbursement as well. And to see how much of a tip is covered under like that, because a per diem essentially covers your meals and your tips, whatever that cost is, and you can either stay up under that or go above that. But yes, a guest or if you're buying for a group of people, that would be reimbursable to you if you have a receipt. But just don't include your meal. It's a little tiny detail, but
And when you're obtaining a frequently you're using your own card, or
You're not
just
using
using a department card.
yeah.
So there's no reimbursement, you're just potentially paying for a meal that was already paid for
Correct.
through per diem check.
Yeah, so normally it's, well, if there's an advance before travel, then yes.
Okay.
But if it's a settlement afterwards, there have been instances where I will use the landmark credit card for its expenses and receive that form. It's very rare that I will use my personal card and then look for that on reimbursement for the landmark credit card is appropriate.
Yeah, I won't use my own card.
I'm learning that I don't need to use income. But no, I would definitely make sure that you have documentation on all of these to see what these are.
Like I said, the documentation that I saw, it was just discrepancy between what I saw and what would have been policy or procedure. So just trying to reconcile that back to making sure everything was approved.
That's good that that's identified and that we get that follow-up, because then if there's ever any questions in the future, we've already got to know what the resolution is.
I guess with that being said, I like the idea of having that report back to us by the next meeting, but at this point, we'll plan on the quarterly process starting in January. I want to go ahead and, rather than just a general request, make a motion that those items be answered and replied to by the next meeting.
Yes. Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right. All two of us.
If anyone asks, did the auditor get into the details, the answer is an astounding yes. Okay. Do we need to make a motion to accept this audit? Anything?
So I think the procedure we used last year was to receive the audit and approve presenting it to the full body meeting after this.
Yes.
Is it on that agenda?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, and so we don't necessarily approve it, we approve sending it to the full board for review and approval.
You accept this as information.
Motion to accept and present to the full board. Item 2C. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Since the full board might have one more person, you better stick around first. That's what I think. I think we can cover it. I think we can answer most. I think we can handle it.
I think the last year y'all were able to take care of it, so.
For the record, I am not the DJ.
Um,
I said there's a $500 for the DJ for some of the stuff. Okay, it's just a JM.
there was a DJ. I was a party for a DJ, yes.
I would like to see you try that.
Yeah, I would motion.
Meeting adjourned?
And motion to adjourn.
Second.